Cześć, welcome to Maverick Baking and welcome to another episode of Desserts of the World. Let's talk about Poland. Poland has a wealth of truly delicious and very much underrated desserts, and thanks to many of my lovely Polish subscribers here on YouTube, hello if you're watching, I've also had a chance to taste a number of their incredible chocolates too. Today in episode 3 of our series of Desserts of the World, we are making a Polish dessert that's as beloved as it is traditional. We're talking about Sernik. You may recognize it as a baked cheesecake, and you'd be right. But the Polish make their cheesecakes with a very particular kind of cheese. In place of the more commonly seen North American cream cheese or Italian mascarpone, the Polish make their cheesecakes with twaróg. Twaróg could be compared to a cottage cheese or an Italian ricotta or even a Scottish crowdie for my locals. It's a rustic and lumpy cheese with a firm texture, but this lovely kind of deliciously tangy and salty yet still subtle flavour. Traditionally, this treat is baked without a base, sweetened ever so slightly, and bound together using Polish potato flour. Occasionally, you will see recipes for sernik made with a biscuit or cake base with some added chocolate, some raisins, citrus zest, but we're keeping it classic today. I was lucky enough when I was back home in Scotland, in my hometown of Aberdeen, to pick up some twaróg, thanks to the pretty big Polish population we have there, thankfully. And I'm happy to say, or I'm hoping, that the only non-traditional ingredient you will see in today's recipe is the use of wheat flour in place of potato flour, because even in my home country, which is absolutely bursting with potatoes, I couldn't find any potato flour. This sernik recipe is rich and satisfying while still being very light and creamy. Personally, I found its flavour somewhere between a slightly salted vanilla baked cheesecake and like a baked custard. You can enjoy it as it is, with perhaps a dusting of icing sugar or with a handful of some lovely Polish blueberries. Let's get into it. This Polish cheesecake begins with the iconic Polish cheese we were talking about. Now, one of the main kind of features of this cheese is that it is undeniably lumpy. Now, while you may like lumpy cheese to eat, it's less pleasant when it's involved in a cheesecake. So the first step in almost every sernik recipe I came across was either to sieve or to kind of blend the cheese until it became a little bit smoother. It doesn't have to be, absolute velvet, but just enough to get those big kind of curdy lumps out of there, to get a slightly smoother and more spreadable texture like this. I am using the world's cheapest food processor, so I'm sure yours will do an even better job. To our smoother cheese, I added some icing sugar, I poured in some double cream, I added some egg yolks. Don't worry, we won't be wasting the whites, they just get used a bit later on. I also added a good glug of my favourite vanilla extract and added just a little touch of corn flour in place of the potato flour, and of course some butter. Another iconic feature of this baked cheesecake, which I've never seen in any other kind before. We then blitz that for a good couple of minutes until it's looking beautifully, lusciously smooth. We're going to set that aside for a second, just until we blitz up the whites that were remaining from the yolks we cracked in earlier. You don't have to go kind of crazy with this. Of course, if you have an electric whisk, it helps. You just want them to be reaching kind of peaks of their own, little soft peaks like this. This is just going to help keep that sernik lovely and fluffy and light while it's in the oven. I then took advantage of the amount of bowls present in the kitchen by putting the cheese mixture in one and then adding about a third of the egg whites at a time. First mixing them in pretty vigorously, as you would with many other kind of egg white based cake mixtures. This just loosens it up and makes it easier to fold in the rest, and then added in the remaining egg whites, stirring and folding them in super gently, not wanting to knock out any of that lovely fluffiness or the air, but just mixing it in enough to keep everything nice and combined without big lumps of airy eggs being in there. And then I took a kind of springform tin, lined it with a bit of greaseproof paper just to help it come off the base nicely, and poured in that beautiful, light, fluffy, creamy sernik batter. Smoothed it out, bashed it to get the air bubbles out, and then baked it in a not too hot oven for just under an hour, and then cooled it with the door slightly ajar. This just helps not to form too many cracks in the center. Once cooled, I unveiled the cheesecake in all of its lovely kind of golden but still creamy glory before dusting it with a generous dose of icing sugar, both for presentation and for flavour, because this isn't a particularly sweet dessert. And that was it. Those are all the steps you need to make your own Polish cheesecake, or sernik. Now, this one I wanted to leave plain and classic to get all of the tastes that would have been eaten back however many decades ago when this was first eaten. And it can be eaten warm, it can be eaten room temperature, or it can be enjoyed cold. We had it just chilled to room temperature just because I wanted to see how it tasted both like that and once it was chilled later on. And I must tell you, it did not disappoint in either form. Like I said earlier, it's probably one of the lightest and most subtle cheesecakes I've ever had. There's nothing super heavy, super sweet, super sickly about it. You can feel the lightness of the eggs. You can feel the slightly tangy flavour of the cheese in there with just enough vanilla and sugar to remind you that you are in fact eating a dessert. And it means that if you enjoy this with some berries, with some fruit compote, with some chocolate, with some caramel, it would probably be even better. Poland, I love your sweets, I love your chocolates, and I can officially say I love your cheesecake too. Thank you so much. Hope you love this one.